right. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Is it better if I sit or?
That's you.
All right, cool. And then I'm just gonna kind of help this to keep track of time so I don't overstay my welcome, because there used to be clocks in a classroom, but I don't see one right now. That was 20 years ago since I'd last been in one, to give you some perspective. What she did leave out was that I did graduate here with a degree in speech communications, a 4-year degree that took me 7 years to get. My dad was a professor at UH Hilo and said, "Hey man, listen, you should probably have a master's degree by now with the amount of credits that you've accumulated." And that pretty much said that, hey, academics maybe wasn't my cup of tea. I actually did try getting into the school of, I actually started out thinking that I was going to be a dentist. I thought, oh wow, that's a pretty low stress. I don't have to be in the ER or any of that. And so I was on the pre-med track, right? I took organic chemistry, got a C. They were like, you need an A or a B plus at most. So I retook it again and got a D. So that pretty much ended science for me. Then I went and tried to get in the School of Business. And they said, well, with your grade point average, anything less than 2.9 or whatever it was. What's the requirement now for 2.5? Okay, well, I wasn't there. So I wasn't there. And then I thought, maybe all my friends are going into education. And then they basically said, hey man, with a 2.5, you got no business teaching anybody else anything. So it's kind of funny that I'm here to share my experiences, but just be warned, that's what you're gonna get, It's a lot of trial, a lot of error, and more error. But anyways, so that's how I ended up here. Please, yeah, and if you guys haven't already, please grab a bag of chips. There's two kinds. There's the Maui onion on potato chips, and the sweet potato and taro, which is just lightly salted. Because at least the crunching and the eating will hopefully keep you engaged, even if I'm unable to. But anyways, so yeah, I didn't come out of college with a real stellar degree. It was either basically, I'm gonna need more school, which at that point was gonna be challenging. Because I didn't quite have the credentials to go on to graduate school, or find a real job. And then, plan C that popped up was, hey man, maybe I'll start a business, right? Even though my grades said otherwise, I always felt like I could do more, I felt like I was capable, so why not prove it? I was working at Chan's Gourmet Buffet, which was, I don't know if Puck's Alley is still there, but they had a Chinese restaurant in Puck's Alley. And then I ended up working for them on Nimitz. They have a location on Nimitz Highway. And, I kind of rose up, became assistant manager. It was confusing because my last name's Chan. People were always like, oh, your parents own the business. Oh, you own the business. No, I just work here. But anyways, I was working there, and Mrs. Chan was always, she's kind of the lady that we're all scared of, but when she came in, she ran a tight ship, and I was like, oh man, if I ever ran my own company, man, I wouldn't put up with this. And but what's really interesting is when I decided to start the Hawaiian chip company, she just kind of had a good laugh, and it was like, oh, good luck. I mean, she's very supportive. But, and I got kind of the same reaction from my friends. You heard, I saw Emeril Lagasse making the chips, so I started frying them up on a still living in my college apartment in Mo'iliili on Eisenberg Street. Fried them up on the stovetop, and then I started passing them out to people and friends, and the idea was that I got together with some other buddies from high school. Some college, some soccer, guys that I played soccer with. And, we wanted to do a sandwich shop. And the whole idea was to make these gourmet sandwiches and serve these cool purple potato chips that I had invented. I didn't know other people were making them already, that I had invented. And that was going to be the hook. But then we went all around town trying to find a place to hey, can you lease us space? Well, how much money you got? We don't got no money, you know. And it's real hard to get a lease without any money. So we said, you know what? This might be too much. We might be taking on too much, because even we found out the build out for a kitchen, just to afford the equipment, was going to be $100,000. In trying to form that company, we raised $10,000 from our friends and family. Of course, everybody's in college. You know what loans are, right? I mean, you know, so we weren't rich with capital, and we had zero experience. So I said, hey, you know what? Let's do these chips. Let's just do the chips. It's easy, you know? We'll just start selling them. We'll do statewide distribution, and in 2 years, we're gonna sell cash out for $2 million. Wow, awesome, great idea. Yeah, and then as you heard, you know, 2 years, that was facing bankruptcy. Because obviously getting to work with my friends, as fun as it was to go surfing in the morning, which I never got good at, and leaving early to go play soccer and then hit the bar, it was not a good business model. We really had to buckle down and take a good look at ourselves. And not because I couldn't get into the School of Business, I didn't know how to read a damn balance sheet or a profit loss statement. So I actually had a good friend from Hilo, a good family friend. You know, he's actually the stepdad of my real close friends, and he was manager of Suisan, which is the equivalent of Waihata up here. So he was the general manager, and he came in and said, hey man, you know, you got a tasty product, but a real shitty business. I mean, it's part of my French, but you know, it was a dumpster fire. I mean, we were selling product way too cheap and not making nearly enough. And our overhead was just killing us. So, but because we had a good product, we could survive on cash flow. So we took that cash flow, learned how to read the balance sheet, figured out what we actually needed to pay our bills, and then eventually pay myself a salary. We cleaned house, got rid of all, you know, I mean, you know, again, as fun as it was to work with friends and this and that, they figured, you know what, we're not making a living at this. We got to go find some real jobs so we can, you know, eat more than just ramen and spam musubi. And so they went ahead and did that, and then I took sole control of the company. You know, they still kept some ownership, but I took sole control of the company, and then started to hire employees, you know, which was a real different, a whole nother lesson in itself. But being able to work with others and be tolerant of others really helped kind of shape the foundation of what Hawaiian Chip Company is today. And where that goes back to working with Mrs. Chan, was one of my biggest frustrations in working at Chan's Buffet was, hey, Mrs. Chan, you know, I'm doing all this. These guys, they're not even doing half the work. Why are they here? You know? And she basically said, hey, listen, you know, even if they do half the work, that's why you make more, right? And there's no sense I get rid of them, because otherwise you cannot do 150% of the work. We still need them to work. So we need them at some capacity. And her knock to everybody else that would, like my parents and whatever, was that, oh, Jimmy, he has potential, but he has no patience with others. I mean, as you'll see, patience is not my best virtue. I mean, it's like, hey, what do you want to do for a living? Oh, I'm going to make potato chips. Let's go. You know, just jump right in. There's no research done at all. I mean, basically, my research was reading about Frito-Lay buying out Maui chips for $2 million, and that was my business plan. You know, so I'm not saying that. So that's not how you should do things. But at the same time, making those mistakes were what kind of built that foundation for me to find discipline and be willing to sacrifice. Otherwise, it would have been just probably I'd probably be financially better off had I just gone and worked a job and salted away 401k, that kind of stuff, right? But again, I took a risk. We hunkered down. No more surfing, no more soccer, none of that. Just working as much as I possibly could. I got a job at Walden Books. Walden Books. You guys don't remember Walden Books? Before Amazon, there used to be this thing called bookstores, and you walk in and there's shelves of books, and you pick it out and you browse and then you buy whatever you want. And I was working there, and the deal was they pay for my medical, they were supporting my living wage, and they let me carry out as many empty boxes as I could carry for every shift. So our chip boxes today that we use are based on the size of the Walden Books boxes. And let me tell you, guys, don't forget, I still show up to make some deliveries. And they're like, hey, remember when these were all Walden Books boxes and you had that broken minivan with no windows? And, so yeah, now I've got a dent in my truck that I refuse to fix. But that's another story. But anyways, yeah, so all the boxes were Walden Books boxes, and that was kind of the start of the grind, the real grind. And from there, I networked. I made sure I expanded my network. To start to learn from other guys, because I had a good base. The networking that you do here, she said, lawyers, attorneys are expensive, accountants charge a lot, all that. Well, graphic designers that you need. Well, luckily, I met all those guys playing soccer, so I get the soccer buddy discount. And that's what really helped us preserve some cash in that beginning. So again, they talked about networking after. It's not to talk to me. It's to talk to you guys and figure out, hey, who's going to be what, and what resource can I tap into later? Because that was real key in survival for the chip company. So those beers that you give away, I don't know if they still let you drink in the dorms, but actually they actually didn't let us back then either. But we might have to edit that. But that can be later. But anyways, and now you know why it took me 7 years to graduate. But the networking is real. It's a real important part of college. And if anything, sure, I learned some skills and this and that, but it was the networking, interpersonal communication, putting. Well, we didn't really have mobile devices. We had pagers at that time. Like you put in a number and you beep beep beep. Oh, I have to go find a phone and call. So this is amazing, But anyways, the networking is really important, and that's what kind of reaching out beyond just the network of my peers now, and reaching out to experts in the industry really helped. Because then, like I said, I had that very uncomfortable conversation with the guy who told me, hey, this, that, but without that, I wouldn't have been able to know how to price my products. And then it came down to tapping into other experts. How do I get my chips into Long's drugs, right? And then it was the same thing. Hey, man, well, I've been running this company. It's an 80-year-old company. I'm going to make my son handle your product. And next thing you know, we're in Long's drugs, And then from there, next thing you know, Costco comes calling. Hey, how do you, can you service our stores and this and that? And that was actually a really, really big critical leap for us, because, that meant we had to tighten up a lot of things and really dedicate ourselves to driving volume. Not just because Costco picked us up, but because once Costco picked us up, all the other stores wanted our product too, because it almost validated, oh wow, now he's got a real company. He's not just Jimmy Chan selling at the swap meet, right? And really that was it, man. Like, show up at 4 a.m, open the trunk of my, Dodge Caravan and trying to peddle chips for $2 a bag. when it cost me $250 to make. Those are the days. But then we kind of evolved past that, and then eventually we with that capital, we finally found some firm footing. I was able to start paying myself. I quit Walden Books, which I had done so, 2 years after doing the Walden Books, I quit because I was like, oh wow, we earn longs, and so I walked away with my head held high, and I went back with my head down. Hey, can I have my job back? Longs isn't quite paying the bills. But once we got Costco and all those other accounts, I walked away again, much more humbly, not skipping down the street, just kind of quietly assuming I'd be back. But I haven't been back yet. And again, they're bankrupt, so I can't go back. But anyways, yeah. So we went. So we finally kind of found that firm footing. I could pay myself a livable wage, a decent wage. Only had to have one job, which still meant working that one job, making taro chips and sweet potato chips. 80 hours a week, sometimes 90 hours a week during the holidays. 10 years ago, there would have been no way I'd be speaking to you right now during this time of year, because we're up to our, whatever. Luckily, I've got a good reliable staff that's hopefully holding down the fort. I haven't got any phone calls, frantic messages, anything yet. But yeah, so we finally found our footing. But then it kind of became, well, what do we do? What do we do now? We were operating out of a space that was like way too small. So they'd come to pick up chips for Costco, and we'd have to navigate through all this, like it was like a maze in our place, and we'd have to basically pull out all the supplies and all that so we could get to the chips, put those out, load the truck up. In fact, one of the drivers was just making fun of me last week about that, reminiscing, and then put all the stuff back in and start up production again. So we were operating out about 2,000 square feet of space, and it was just way too small. So it came down to ran some other buddies, some Australians, and they were like, hey man, why don't you visit? That's a terrible accent. If anybody's from Australia, I'm sorry, but what, why don't you buy a building? Why don't you invest, and let's buy some property, because every time we started to raise our revenue, the landlord recognized it and raised the rent, which is what you do as a landlord. It's not his fault that we were doing well, and he could capitalize on that, because we still weren't at a strong enough position to negotiate something long term, nor did we want something long term, knowing that we had not enough space at that location. So I went down to the territory. So I started kind of looking online, and I thought, I don't know, man. That's a pretty big leap. Up until that point, after being on the brink of bankruptcy, you're used to the banks saying no. And no without laughter was kind of a good one. That meant, oh, okay, that was a good meeting. Otherwise, it was very, very, very humbling going up and saying, hey, listen, I'm struggling with my business, and basically being told, hey, well, we can't loan you any money because we don't see a pathway to success based on your numbers. So luckily, I had a friend, played soccer with him, who said, hey man, over some beers, said, hey, why don't you come down to the bank and meet my boss? He heard about your company and wanted to chat. And so I went down. He said, hey, bring your financials while you're at it. I was like, oh, great. And then so I took him down. I told him basically the story I just shared with you, how I started the company, what I was doing. And then he asked, well, what do you see your future being? And I thought, well, I'd really like to buy some property. And I showed him this. I said, in 5 to 10 years, I'd like to be able to buy a building like this one, which is a warehouse listed for $1.3 million. And instead of laughing, which is what I was expecting, or an abrupt end to the meeting, he actually looked at me and said, hey, I can tell you work hard, and I know that you're going to really commit to whatever it is you take on at this point. We want to put this loan together for you. We want to help you buy that building. And I just went, and I mean, I kind of looked at my friend thinking, like, is this guy for real? Is he even, I mean, that was like that real moment where I felt like, oh, I might actually have a viable business. I mean, after just kind of squeaking along for so many years, it was nice to finally get that affirmation. So we went ahead and bought it, and that was actually even I got some advice from Mike Irish. The Holmes Enterprises, Kyoki's Lao Lao, Diamond Head Seafood, big company. They're probably in the tens of millions right now. And anyways, he was operating his Lao Lao factory and seafood warehouse right down the street from me, and he had told me about importance of how he owns all his property, owns all his vehicles, has very low debt and all that stuff. And I thought, wow, you know what? If that's what he did to build that, then maybe I can take a leap too. And so we did so, and it was a challenge. It kind of set me back now, because now we're paying out all this money for a place to operate out of. Whereas I was used to a little more positive cash flow, but at the end of the day, I kind of look at the building itself as being my retirement plan. I don't have 401k as an entrepreneur. I don't have a pension. Our company's just not that big. I saw that as that opportunity, so I took that on, and from there we were able to continue growing. We grew into that space pretty quickly, although it really wasn't until I just had a conversation with Mike, the guy who talked about it, buying the importance of buying your own building and stuff. And I told him, I was like, hey man, thank you so much. Thank you for that advice. It's really allowing me to have a nice presence and on Nimitz Highway. I don't know if any of you guys seen our factory. If you drive on Nimitz, look for the bright orange glow, and that's our marketing. That's half our marketing right there. I don't pay for TV ads or anything. I just pay for paint, brightly colored paint, and because now we do retail out of that place too, which was actually the original dream at the other place. It was like, okay, you know what? We're going to open up here, 2,000 square feet. We're going to sell to the public. We're going to open up, and everybody's going to come down. It's going to be like Big Island Candies. You guys familiar with Big Island Candies? They have a nice warehouse. It's the omiyage thing. We opened our doors, and all we had were like strung out guys on crack, and they were not premium customers. But now with our own building, now that we've kind of taken control and spent the time building a brand, which was what was missing back then. Now we have a viable brand that people recognize. People are coming down. They're coming down to buy chips, not just in the packages like you see at Costco and Long's, but they're buying them made to order, similar to the chips that you're hopefully enjoying. Anybody have a bad chip? No? They're okay? All right, good, all right. So let's give them a unique experience. Let's let them come down, order the chips right off the production line, because that's what I enjoyed the most, right? And doing quality control, sometimes I'm like, oh wow, hey, that's pretty good. Let me have another one. I better have another one. And then I'm like, how do we connect with customers, especially since it was a challenge to export. You think, oh yeah, sell to California, this, that, but the shipping, it almost doubles the price of my product. The product is already high because we're shipping in half the materials, the bags, all this and that. So export wasn't viable. But how do we increase revenue? Bring them to us. Go back to the Big Island Candy model. Have the customers come to us. And we're able to do that because we own the property. We're able to just put in a store. We're able to, expand in the area. We're, it's kind of funny because I ran into Mike again, and I like I said, I was thanking him for his advice, and he was like, "Hey, man, no, it's you're the only guy that listened." And then I was like, "Well, at points after buying the building, I did have to second guess. I don't know if Mike was right. This doesn't feel too good, trying to pay a much bigger mortgage now." But after 10 years, I was like, now it finally feels like we've grown into it. And he's like, "Well, how many years?" I said, it's almost 10 years. He's like, "Yeah, me too. It took me 10 years to grow into my building." I was like, "Well, you could have told me that then, but it would have saved me a little grief." But anyways, that was just some good advice that I got, and now we're comfortable again, and we're paying bills on time. We're generating positive revenue. Not flying a private jet anytime soon, but we're able to buy a house. But that entrepreneur in me, there's just something wrong with some of us. It's like, well, now that you're comfortable, what do? Oh, let's go buy another building. So we bought one across the street. We painted it bright, even uglier orange, and we put in two locations. One to support our sauce. We're gonna set up our sauce factory over there. I don't know if you guys know Kilway of Fire. You guys heard of Kilway of Fire? So we started that 10 years ago. Sorry, I don't mean to jump on the timelines, but everything gets a little convoluted when you're launching two integrated brands. But we started that 10 years ago because we had this seasoning, Kilway of Fire, and it was my favorite seasoning. It was one of the first seasonings I came up with. It's cayenne and habanero smashed into a garlic base, but it was way too spicy for a lot of people. But we had some people that were just full loyalists, like, "Oh, we love it. We'll buy 10 bags and whatever." But that was only like one out of 1,000 customers. So, but anyways, because of that loyalty to that, I had another guy who wanted us to do a chili pepper water, and then I was like, "Oh, I don't know." So we kind of had a little competition, and then so that's kind of how the Kilway of Fire sauce came about, because then I wanted to do a barbecue sauce, and we took it, we figured out that it's got really good utility. I think it can be a bigger company and a product than the Hawaiian Chip Company, but the Hawaiian Chip Company is still what pays the bills. So as that grows, it keeps me involved there. But one day the goal is to eventually be able to step back from the daily operation of the chip company and then grow that sauce nationally. Tabasco, Sriracha, Kilauea. And again, it sounds crazy, but so did I at the soccer field 20 years ago, saying, "Hey, I'm going to make a living selling these greasy sweet potato chips," and that's pretty much where we're at. So now we've got a store that we sell hot chips from across the street. We've just set up that new building that we're buying. It's got a sandwich shop. It's run by a chef, executive chef at Lanai Four Seasons. He was a chef at the Pacific Club, and now he makes these awesome beef brisket sliders, adobo pork sliders, featuring the dressing that we make that we sell at the Hawaiian Chip Company, and our Kilauea Fire sauce. So we're open, Monday through Friday. Sorry, I'm going to just plug my retail here, shamelessly. But we're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, Saturdays, 10 to 3. Stop by and just say hi, just say, hey, is Jimmy around? I was, at UH and, whatever. And if I'm around, yeah, I'd love to come out and greet you guys. Can't quite give you a tour or anything unless we arrange that on another maybe another segment or something. I'd love to have you guys down here because, again, it all started here, The reason why I got a lot of C's and D's and incompletes was because I'd be in and you guys were awesome because by now I'd have plans for my awesome Jim Buck's coffee shop, drawn out or this or that, and it was always but again that's how it goes, and I just wasn't really an academic, but I definitely benefited from the environment, and I figured out how to move forward, and I hope some of you do the same. And now that we're having a little bit of success, again, by success I mean survival. These days survival is success, and I'm happy to share that journey. And I finally settled down, got a family, have a daughter, and now that we're looking, aside from buying property, we found some other meaningful things to put our efforts to. My daughter earlier this year was diagnosed with this super rare condition called Rett syndrome. So it's a rare genetic disorder where girls develop normally. It only affects girls because it's fatal in boys because it's on the X chromosome. And they develop normally until they're about 2 or 3. And then once they hit that point, they start to regress. So even if they were talking, walking, this and that, they lose that capacity because they lack a specific protein to be able to tell their bodies what to do, what to say, how to move. Fortunately, my daughter seems to be a milder case to this point. Her speech still hasn't come in. She only has about 100 or 200 words that she can use, but she is doing well. She has a full-time therapist that work with her in school, and unfortunately there is no cure yet. And Hawaiian Chip Company is now doing 1% of all, we're donating 1% of all our gross revenue towards funding Rett syndrome research. We still help all kinds of other charities and this and that, but we started doing Rett syndrome research and putting these Holly's Choice stickers on. So on certain products, you'll see the Holly's Choice sticker to raise awareness. Because again, it's a single genetic defect. And if they can figure out a way to cure that genetic defect, sorry, I'll step back in. So if they can figure out a way to cure that genetic defect, it would open up the door to curing all kinds of stuff, like Parkinson's, which is, I believe, seven, and then 7 defects, and Alzheimer's, ALS, even autism. And that's kind of what we've found meaningful now that we've gotten past that starving entrepreneur stage. And I just hope that you guys at some point, when you figure out, hey, what it is that you're going to do with your business, and hopefully you're making, the big mega internet, the Silicon Valley bucks, and you'll find something to effectuate change and stuff with your community. And that's kind of what we're doing with this. And so you just, by supporting Hawaiian Chip, you're helping my daughter's journey. And because again, I felt a little weird about doing this because I even talked to my attorney, and I was like, you know what, man, I don't know if we should do that because it sounds a little weird. And he's like, that's how a lot of philanthropy gets started. Someone, either the head of the company or on the board, gets personally affected by something, and any parent is going to do whatever it takes to help their kid. at whatever resources they have at their disposal, and we just happen to have a chip company. So thank you very much. I just want to end on that note, and I'd like to hand out one of these to each of you, along with a bottle of Kilway Fire Hot Sauce. So, all right. Thank you.